It's time for the whole 9 yards. Down the stretch they come. Only 3 Saturdays remain before FCS playoff selections. It's that time of year, folks. I'm Ralph Ventre, and I am ready for Week 11 in NEC football. 3 teams are on the bye. Only 3 games this week. All 3 are Northeast Conference contests. And of course, one of those matchups, a crosstown rivalry game between 2 NEC unbeatens. I'll tackle that matchup and more in the opening drive. Let's start with Wagner at Sacred Heart. The visiting Seahawks looking to snap a 4-game slide. Their 3 league losses have all but eliminated them from title contention, but they believe there is still plenty to play for, and head coach Jason Hoteling will have his men focused and ready.
We just got to do the right thing in practice, keep guys healthy these remaining 3 weeks, go out there this week against Sacred Heart and put our best effort that we can on the table. You try and talk about it a little bit in the summertime, hey guys, it's going to be over like that, and then next thing you know, you're there, and you focus on each week, but there's also reality to it for some of these seniors. It's like, oh man, this is probably the last time I'm going to play college football or football in general. So they want to go out, they want to do the right thing, they want to work hard, and I've said it the whole year. This is a special group of young men, and I have no doubt that they're going to go out and work extremely hard all week, and the staff will work hard, and scout teams will work hard, and that's just what you're supposed to do, and that's what you need to do, and we get this opportunity plus 2 more. So, you go out, you have fun, you play the game.
Now, Sacred Heart was mired in a 3-game losing streak earlier in the season, but the Pioneers have responded by posting back-to-back NEC road wins. Sophomore defensive end Kevin Pepra, who had 3 tackles for a loss in last week's win over Bryant, he explained the team's mentality in the recent turnaround.
I think just overall, we lost 3 in a row. It was pretty tough for us, so we went back in the drawing board, just kept practicing, kept doing more in practice, all that, emphasizing everything, that every game matters, every game counts, and we just been fighting the past 2 games, and it's been looking well for us, and we're looking next week to keep doing the same thing.
Now, Pepra is a key piece on the defensive side of the ball. Flip it over to offense, though, and Sacred Heart has 2 premier playmakers. Both are underclassmen. Freshman receiver Tyrese Chambers, one of the NEC's leading receivers this year. He was just named to the Stats Jerry Rice Award watch list. Of course, the Jerry Rice Award, that annually goes to the top freshman in the football championship subdivision. Now, Chambers is the pass catcher. The guy in the backfield, that's sophomore running back Julius Chestnut, and he is hard to tackle. That's an understatement. Chestnut, over 1,100 rushing yards thus far this season. He's tops in the FCS. Now, Wagner, with its fierce front 7, has been solid against the run. They fared well against Monmouth's Pete Guerrero. Guerrero ranks 2nd in the FCS in individual rushing yards. The Seahawks held him at bay for the most part in a 16-14 setback earlier this season. Wagner on the road at Sacred Heart, live on NEC Front Row. From Fairfield, Connecticut, we move up the road to hard-hitting New Britain, home of the number 17 team in the country, the CCSU Blue Devils. The Week 11 opponent for CCSU will be St. Francis. Red Flash are coming east following last week's 30-21 defeat at Duquesne. SFU head coach Chris Valerio admits that his team has a tough test on its hands this week, but he's confident the Red Flash will keep clawing.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to our team that keeps growing. Just keep playing hard, keep battling, and let's see what happens, because we're going to get over this hump. I don't know when it's going to be, but we're going to get over this hump, and better days are ahead of us, and that's what I keep relaying to the team. They just got to keep believing in each other and keep loving, and good things are going to happen for us.
Saturday's showdown in New Britain will pit strength against strength. SFU on the defensive side, they'll have to contain a CCSU quarterback, Aaron Winchester, recently named to the Walter Payton Award watch list, and Winchester enters Saturday's contest with the top passer rating in the NEC and the 5th highest number in the FCS. Another battle between strength and strength in this game will be the red flash passing attack against that CCSU defense. SFU quarterback Jason Brown and receiver Rayshawn Henry have been on fire of late. In the last 2 games, Brown and Henry have connected on 22 passes for 379 yards and 3 touchdowns. Meanwhile, that CCSU defense, well, they only rank 2nd in the nation with 15 interceptions. SFU's Chris Valerial knows just how good that CCSU defense is, and he's also impressed with quarterback Aaron Winchester.
Defensively, they're creating turnovers. They're not letting you run the ball. They have some big guys up front. They got some linebackers that can rush the passer. They're very confident in that secondary. And then offensively, their quarterback, he just creates headaches. He's a guy that their coaching staff has done a great job with him and giving him opportunities. He can tuck the ball away. I think he had close to 200 yards rushing against Bryant, and he can throw the ball.
Now, there is no NEC featured game on ESPN3 this week. That schedule will resume on November 16th. But if there was a featured matchup, it would probably be this Steel City showdown. Robert Morris hosting Duquesne, and as if we needed another reason to be stoked about this one, first place is on the line. The winner of this matchup will be guaranteed no worse than a tie for first place in the league standings with 2 games to go. First, let's take a look at how Robert Morris got here. The Colonials are 4-0 in the NEC, but they did trail at halftime in each of the 4 victories. Now, in the second half of those games, the Colonials hit their stride. The last 2 contests, they've outscored the opposition 38-7 over the final 30 minutes. In NEC play, 66-17, Robert Morris outscores its opponent in the second half. Now, head coach Bernard Clark is certainly pleased that his Colonials are 4-0. He praised their moxie for the late game results, but he did mention that he doesn't know how much more his heart can take of this. He also noted that there have been some inconsistencies in those games, and he would like to see the Colonials correct those as we hit the final 3 weeks of the 2019 campaign. Now, as far as consistency goes, Robert Morris tailback Elijah Jackson has been rock solid. He missed the Bryant game due to injury, but he came back in last week's win over LIU, and he recorded his 5th 100-yard rushing game of the season. Now, taking a look over at the Duquesne Dukes, the NEC preseason favorite, they're in the title mix once again. Of course, everyone knows their primary ball carrier, A.J. Hines, an All-American, and then graduate Mark Allen from Penn State. He's been a nice addition to the Duquesne attack. Now, the Dukes have trailed early in their last 2 NEC games, but they've quickly righted the ship. They are 4-0 in league play. Their new offensive line, which features 4 new starters from last year's team, well, this unit seems to be gaining cohesion and comfort as the days move forward. As for the man playing behind that offensive line, quarterback Daniel Parr, he was responsible for 3 touchdowns in the Week 10 win over SFU, but he also suffered a late injury in that game. So keep an eye on Parr's status as game time gets closer. Now, real quick here as we close out the opening drive, one link between the Dukes and Colonials, both 4-0 in NEC play, and one link on the statistical page is turnover margin. Colonials +5 against NEC opponents. Duquesne +4 in turnover margin in league games. Probably not a coincidence that these two teams will be facing off in a first-place showdown in Week 11. Let's check in on the NEC stock market. I'll tell you whose value is all the way up. Now, Robert Morris is 4-0 with contributions from across the board, but in the last 2 NEC wins, there's been a rookie receiver who's made sensational plays. Freshman Garrett Hauser, well, he had 1 catch in the non-conference win over VMI. It was a 15-yard touchdown. Then he was quiet for 3 games, but now he's broken through. Hauser with 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns each of the past 2 weeks. Combining his numbers in the wins over Bryant and LIU, the freshman receiver has made 4 catches for 138 yards and 2 extremely important touchdowns. He's a rookie receiver for Robert Morris. His name is Garrett Hauser, and his stock is on the way up. I'll take the Twitter timeout. Looking at the tweet sheet, we learned that the Hula Bowl is back, and one of the NEC's top performers has received an invitation to the postseason Senior All-Star Game for pro prospects. It's Wagner linebacker Cam Gill, the active leader in the FCS in terms of sacks. Gill has been garnering attention for the past 2 seasons, and now it appears he can head to Hawaii to put his talents on display at the Hula Bowl. Now, before this All-Star Game went on hiatus, there was one NEC player to participate. It was Central Connecticut's Justice Hairston after his All-American season in 2006. So Gill would join Hairston as the only NEC players ever to participate in the Hula Bowl. But that may not be all for Gill. As you can see, it turns out Gill may have an opportunity with the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. He has not yet received an invitation for the game, but he is on the watch list, so we will see how that all shakes out. Wagner's Cam Gill, his phenomenal collegiate career is coming to a close, but there may be an opportunity to play in the pros. Stats amazing, bro. And it's a Blue Devil double dose here this week in the Stats Amazing segment. First, real quick, that quarterback Aaron Winchester, mentioned him earlier. He's been a huge key to CCSU's success. Just added to the Walter Payton Award watch list. And what's amazing, I mentioned that passer efficiency rating of 174.5. That's the 5th highest in FCS. The one stat that is truly impressive, though, 10.26 yards per pass attempt. That leads the Northeast Conference. Now, on the other side of the ball, the CCSU defense, well, we can go on and on for days about this unit. They have allowed only 2 rushing touchdowns all season long. That's fewest in the FCS. They're holding opposing ball carriers to only 2.2 yards per carry. And now one stat to sum it all up, the Blue Devils have scored 22 rushing touchdowns on offense. That's a league high. And of course, you know, they've only allowed 2 scores on the ground on defense. That is some serious production. Stats amazing. As we do every week, we chop it up with Rick Saratella of the NFL Draft Bible. Rick was on location scouting Cam Gill and others at the Wagner game in Week 10. We talked about that and plenty more on this week's edition of the NEC Football Chop Shop. Back in the NEC Football Chop Shop for Week 11, I'm Ralph Ventre with the NEC. He's Rick Saratella down at the Jersey Shore. Of course, he's with NFL Draft Bible, also scouting for the NFL PA Collegiate Bowl. And I know you were on location this past week at an NEC venue, basically on location across the nation for the entire season. But this Saturday, you wound up at one of our games, and I know a couple of things impressed you. So what did you see in Week 10, Rick?
Yeah, Ralph, always nice to stay in the backyard, take a trip over that Verrazano Bridge out to Staten Island. And, you know, hey, there's a handful of guys at the NFL PA Bowl that we're keeping an eye on from this past weekend with that Central Connecticut Wagner game. And, you know, listen, Cam Wagner, NEC all-time sack record holder, didn't disappoint, added 2 more to his total. And Chris Williams, what can I say? I mean, this guy is pro-ready, 10 tackles, couple tackles for loss. But we're going to go over to Central Connecticut for my game balls. We're going to start off on the offensive side. Kyron Petaway, the freshman wideout. We talked about him last week. All he's doing, Ralph, is just making plays. The Waterbury, Connecticut, former high school track standout now. He's got some speed, 4 catches, 90 yards, big play, touchdown. Hey, all he does is move the chains. 3 catches in the first half, all for first downs. Comes out in the second half in that opening drive, big 39-yard touchdown to kind of put Central ahead and dictate the second half. It was a tale of 2 halves, tied up at halftime. Kyron Petaway with the big play in that third quarter, kind of putting Central in the right direction to get the W.
Yeah, he had 2 touchdown catches a couple of weeks ago. A rookie, small in size, listed at only 5'9", 155, but as you mentioned, comes from a track background, so he can turn on those burners as evidenced on the field. And Tyshawn James is really developed into Central Connecticut's primary receiver. He certainly demands a lot of attention from opposing defenses. And then a guy like Petway is stepping up, and he's making those opposing defenses pay. So, I've seen a lot of what you're seeing there with the Central Connecticut rookie.
Yeah, and you know what's nice is they didn't have him the first couple games of the year. The last 3 games, as you mentioned, 2 touchdowns a couple games ago, 3 touchdowns in his last 3 games, gives him an added element on the offensive side of the ball. Now, defense, you know, we talked about the Wagner guys, but our defensive game ball is going to go to Central Connecticut as well here, and that's Brandon Purett, the defensive lineman. He had a pair of tackles for negative 22 yards, a big reason why they held Wagner to negative 26 rushing yards in the second half. Again, tale of 2 halves, dominated the line of scrimmage. The Rochester, New York native now, also adding a quarterback hurry, 4 tackles on the day. He's having a big season, Ralph. He's become an anchor along this defensive line up front. The senior team leader now has 7.5 tackles for loss, including 4.5 sacks, he gets our NEC Defensive Game Ball of the Week.
All right, so Central Connecticut with the big win over Wagner, 27-13. They continue their winning ways, now 8-0 against FCS opponents, up to number 17 in the AFCA Coaches Top 25. Then in the Stats Top 25, they actually dropped a spot from 19 to 20. I don't know how that happened. Voters may be sleeping a little bit on CCSU, but I know you're not sleeping on CCSU, Rick. So obviously you witnessed a great performance against Wagner by the Blue Devils. Now, what do you expect to see in Week 11 in the NEC? Only 3 games on this card. It's a light docket, but which of those 3 are you focusing in on?
Well, it's a battle of NEC undefeateds as Duquesne travels to Robert Morris. Both teams 4-0 in NEC play. Both teams with a 4-game winning streak. They're both hot to trot here. 2 great head coaches, and we should take a time. I know you were in attendance last week, I should say, for the Duquesne St. Francis game. Coach Schmidt becoming the school's all-time winningest coach. Great scene to see. I love social media because we actually get to see as it all happens, and his 98th career win, most in all-time school history.
Yeah, and they had a nice quick hit interview on Twitter with Coach Schmidt after the game. He, of course, surpassed Greg Gattuso, former coach at Duquesne. He's now actually the head coach at Albany. So, as you mentioned, Schmidt with victory number 98. Then on the other side, this upcoming Saturday, you'll have Schmidt on one sideline. He's a longtime veteran in the NEC. On the other side, it's a second-year coach in the NEC, Bernard Clark Jr. A lot of people know him from his days as a linebacker at the U. It was actually pretty cool. A couple of weeks ago, NEC TV was in town for a Robert Morris game, and Jeff Fiegels was color commentator. Of course, Fiegels was a teammate with Bernard Clark on the national championship team in the 80s. So, but anyway, it looks like some of that winning now is leaking over into Coach Clark's coaching tenure. Robert Morris was picked to finish next to last in the preseason poll, but here they are in a 3-way tie for first place, guaranteed to have a winning conference record.
And I'll tell you another thing, Ralph. In terms of in-game adjustments, I think Clark might be the best coach in the conference right now. I mean, you talk about halftime adjustments. They've now won 4 games in a row. Every game has been a second-half comeback. They've gone into the halftime trailing, and they've come out victorious now 4 straight games. You saw them hold last week 23 yards in the second half allowed. So you see the halftime adjustments coming into play. Pace behind that talented running back Elijah Jackson again. 18 carries for $128, ripping off 8.5 yards per carry, added a touchdown. And then George Martin, the quarterback, another sensational sophomore. These guys are holding the ground, very efficient. 12 for 18 last week, $150 through the air, 2 touchdowns, including a 31-yard strike to that man again, Matthew Gonzalez, who now has a touchdown in 9 straight games dating back to the past season. So Gonzalez, Martin, Elijah Jackson, high-powered offense. We talked about the defense and stymieing the second half, but they're going to have their hands full with Duquesne because Kellen Taylor, big play Kellen, the former basketball standout, he's got a vertical game now. 8 catches, career high, 101 yards a week ago, 15-yard touchdown pass from Daniel Parr, who had another strong week, 203 yards through the air.
Yeah, and Kellen Taylor, I know you've been high on him since the start of the season. Duquesne opened up that game against St. Francis in Week 10, slant right over the middle. Taylor pulled it in for a big gain, and then of course, you mentioned the touchdown pass. Kind of Daniel Parr just dropped it in the bucket over the defense. Taylor was there for the touchdown. So a big game for Taylor, over 100 yards receiving in that win for Duquesne. So it'll be interesting to see how the Robert Morris defense tries to neutralize him. Of course, the Duquesne defense will have its hands full because you mentioned Robert Morris tight end Matthew Gonzalez, and of course the Jersey guy Elijah Jackson on the ground. It's a Steel City showdown, so that game is naturally going to attract a lot of attention. But now with two 4-0 teams, I completely get it. I know why you're salivating over that matchup, because it's as good as they come here in the Northeast Conference.
And we got the perennial powerhouse in Duquesne against the up-and-coming Cinderella Robert Morris. Two great head coaches, two great coached teams. We'll see who wins on Saturday.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to miss it. Just like I would never want to miss the weekly Chop Shop with Ralph and Rick. As always, it's a pleasure chopping it up about NEC football with NFL Draft Bible's Rick Saratella. I'm Ralph Ventre. We'll do it again next week. So now you're ready for Week 11 in Northeast Conference football. 3 games to enjoy, all 3 live on NECFrontRow.com. All 3 are free of charge, and all 3 can also be accessed on the new NEC On the Run app. NEC football hitting the stretch run. It's a beautiful time of year. Enjoy Week 11. I'll see you next time. I'm Ralph Ventre for the whole 9 yards.